All right, sorry, I'm about a minute late there. That's a first, but I had to run, take a break, get something else to drink, grab a little piece of banana bread. Let me re-up the audio to make sure everything sounds okay. Audio tends to occasionally get... All right, that should be good. Okay, so this is History 286, History of Religion. And I'm assuming that while not that many folks have been watching live, I do see the numbers go up later. So I guess you guys are watching when you can, and that's cool. Everybody's got to work or whatever. But I'm doing it the time, these are the times that my classes normally would be held on campus. This is normally an on-campus class. But whatever works for everybody is fine with me. You all want to go back and watch these later? You don't have to watch them at all, of course, but you also don't have to come to class, This is just to help you. I just feel like you do better if I kind of go through it all with you live or on video rather than you just having it and reading it and that being that. So it worked well in the spring and I'm continuing to do it. I couldn't imagine teaching an online class and never actually interacting with you at all. That would just not be something I would ever be interested in doing. So I know other people do it that way. I don't know how, and God bless them. Okay, so you know that we have finished up the material for the first test, and that will go up as soon as this video is over. So as of noon, that test will pop up on Blackboard. It will be there for like a week. So you should have ample opportunity to get in there at some point and take it. It'll take you about half an hour. I think I allow 40 minutes, which is probably more time than I normally allow in classroom classes. And I don't think anybody ever takes that long. Usually about 20 to 25 minutes, everybody's done. But I may just want to make sure you don't run out of time. So I give you about 40 minutes. It'll pop up at noon and it'll be there for a week. But once you start it, you need to finish it. You can't come in and answer a question and then come back tomorrow and answer another question. It doesn't work that way. So that exam covers the introduction, basic religions, and then Native American and African native religions. That's what's on test number 1. But last week, we also started part 2 for the second exam, the midterm. And that was Hinduism. So today, we are going to cover Jainism and Buddhism, 2 more religions that are connected originally to India. Then next week, we will do Sikhism, which is the last part of the second exam. And we'll draw a line and say that's where the second exam ends. And we'll start with some more stuff. And your second exam will go up the week of July 13th. And then don't forget also your writing assignment is due by midnight, Monday, July 27th. And there's a place in the Blackboard. I put a link where you go to upload it. And as I mentioned previously, somebody asked me, what if I can't get that to work? I've had problems in the past. And I said, well, then you can email it to me. If you have to email me the paper rather than uploading it through Blackboard, just make sure your name is all over it. And it's very clear what class and all that, so I won't be confused by it. You don't want me confused. You want me knowing exactly what's going on. Okay. So we've got 2 chapters to look at today. I think that's everything I was going to mention. We still don't know exactly what's going to happen this fall. The college is still working out the details of how things are going to be taught this fall. I mean, that's true of almost everything that I'm involved with. Conventions this fall are still trying to figure out if they're going to happen or not. They're probably not. Sports is trying to, football is trying to figure out if it's going to happen. Racing is trying to figure out. They're all trying to figure out what they're going to do. And colleges are no different. So they're trying to figure out what's possible, what they can do, and all that. So we don't know exactly yet, but I'm sure there'll be announcements coming soon. But in the meantime, make sure you go ahead and register for fall classes, because whether they're taught entirely on campus, entirely online, or some combination of the two, you want to be all set and ready to go. Okay, I guess I'll go ahead and get into part 5 Jainism, and then we'll do part 6 Buddhism. So let's see, Jainism. Jainism is a very brief one. This won't take very long. There it is. There it is. Okay, I had to find the right button. And then share the screen. Boom. Okay. Remember, I can also put them like this. I'm bigger than you, Jainism. I'm sorry, I'm trying to... There we go. Okay. You don't need to see much of me, just a little bit. Okay, so Jainism in some ways is very similar to Hinduism because it comes directly out of Hinduism. In other ways, it's very similar to Buddhism, and in fact, its founder might as well be Buddha because it rebelled against Hinduism and became its own thing, just like Buddhism did. I realize my comparisons won't make a whole lot of sense until I've gone over both, but you'll see as I go along here. Okay, so Jainism, there's its symbol, the lotus in the hand. So we're still in India, the Indian subcontinent. You might, as we go along through Jainism, you may very well be tempted to say, well, how is this any different from Hinduism? They didn't really change that much. It's just a type of Hinduism. Well, here's one of the answers up front. This is not Hinduism because Hinduism requires you to believe the Vedas, right? The Vedas are the Hindu Bible. And if you believe in the Vedas, then poof, you're a Hindu, whether you like it or not. Like if you believe in the New Testament, poof, you're a Christian, right? If you believe in the Quran, poof, you're a Muslim. Well, if you believe in the Vedas, you're a Hindu by definition, whether you know it or not. Well, the Jains don't believe in the Vedas, or in the caste system. So if you reject the Vedas and you reject the caste system, poof, you're not a Hindu. You're something else, right? And you're this. Their founder was called Mahavira. I'll go ahead and tell you that on your second exam, one of the questions I do ask, a couple of questions I ask is, who was the founder of this religion, or which religion did this person found, right? So Hinduism didn't have a founder, but the other three in this section do. So I would know who Mahavira is, and I would know who the founder of Buddhism is, Buddha, and I would know who the founder of Sikhism is. All right. So Mahavira is the founder. He was born as... Now, this is the first time we've seen that, but it will not be by any means the last. The 6th century BC pops up over and over and over in this course. It was just a hotbed time for religions, apparently. There was a lot of chaos in Asia going on, civil war and unrest. And whenever you have a lot of domestic strife and conflict going on, many people will turn to religion, right? And they will look to prophets for answers. And so people looked to Mahavira for answers during the 6th century BC when all this bad stuff was going on. And he came to be known as Great Hero. In fact, his name, Mahavira, literally means great hero because he figured out essentially how to break the reincarnation cycle and go to heaven, go to Hindu heaven or Jain heaven, without having to keep coming back and reliving your lifetime over and over and trying to work your way up right. In other words, they didn't believe in the caste system. They don't believe in the Vedas. They believe it's possible to get to heaven in one lifetime without having to keep coming back and coming back. So he figured that out, allegedly, and so they call him Great Hero. He lived a similar life to Buddha. That's no kidding. Again, when we do Buddha, you'll be like, man, this Buddha is very similar to Mahavira. Yes, very similar. There are 23 others that we're not going to go into. Remember, highly honored or venerated as founders of the religion, but he's the main one. What happened was he was a wealthy and powerful person, but he was not happy with it. He felt like something was just missing in life, right? The money wasn't making him happy. The power wasn't making him happy. He felt like something was missing, spiritual. So he gave up his wealth, just like a Hindu who gives up to go off in the upper caste, remember, to go off and become a hermit and all that, become a wandering beggar. He does that. He gives it up. He joins a group of ascetics. Now, I may have mentioned this. My chair is about to fall apart. I may have mentioned the ascetics before, but they become very important in Jainism. Asceticism and being an ascetic is one of the key parts of being a Jain. So let me make clear what an ascetic is and what asceticism is. This is where you give away all your belongings and you try not to let worldly goods and worldly objects and stuff dominate you, right? You want to be separate from earthly concerns. Live a very Spartan, sparse lifestyle. So he tried that, but he was still unhappy. And by the way, Buddha did all of this too, as you will see. So this is where he diverges from Buddha, right? He and Buddha followed the exact same path in roughly the same years, believe it or not. But they get to this point and they're both still unhappy. And the choices that they make now separate Jains who go one way from Buddhists who go the other. And this is why Jainism and Buddhism are not the same religion, right? Jainism and Buddhism are not Hinduism because Jainism and Buddhism reject the Vedas and go their own way. But Jainism and Buddhism are not the same religion because they choose different directions to go once they do that. What Mahavira did was decide you have to try harder. You have to try harder. Mahavira's big revelation was if asceticism doesn't work, I have to try being an ascetic even harder. Here's a little spoiler, okay? Little preview spoiler. Buddha decides if asceticism isn't working, I'm going to go in the opposite direction and try something else. Okay? When Mahavira gets to that point, he just doubles down on asceticism. Okay, that's the difference. They are almost seem like the same person, except Buddha says, forget this, I'm going to go try something else. Mahavira says, I'm going to try even harder to make this work. He also practiced ahimsa, and this is another very important term. I'm not throwing a lot of terms. This is a short section. There's not a lot here. But this is an important concept. Ahimsa is an important concept of Jainism. You have the two A's, right? It's easy-ish to remember that the two big activities or beliefs of Jainism both start with an A. One is asceticism, and the other is ahimsa. What is ahimsa? This is non-injury to life. You're trying not to hurt anybody or anything. You're trying your best not to hurt anybody or even anything, because they might be your friend reincarnated. You don't know. He avoided attachments because he felt like that pulled you back down into the physical world and not spiritual. He avoided stepping on insects because they're alive. He begged for his food because, I love this, he only ate leftovers because he felt like if he prepared his food himself, or if his food was prepared for him, then he was responsible for its death. But if he only ate leftovers, he's eating food that was prepared for somebody else. Now, A, does this seem hypocritical? Kind of. B, does that mean that you couldn't ever have a world of just Jains because there wouldn't be anybody to order the original dish and give you the leftovers? Yeah. So it's difficult to imagine, but this is true of a lot of these religions that come out of India, is that they are very dependent on the people around them being kind of indulgent. So, okay. And they also wore these white outfits. I'll get to that in a second. He practiced torment of the body. Again, you're wanting to separate from the physical world. And so he went around always naked. And again, in the United States, this would get your So let me know. I keep my headphones on so I can hear if it messes up. It should be okay now. Thanks. Does it sound okay now? Let me know if it's okay now. Okay. I'm going to continue on. So the reason I have Beavis and Butthead here, they like to sit around and do almost nothing, right? They just sit there and go, and that's kind of what the Jains do. So here's what Mahavira taught. You'll see how it ties into their their beliefs. Okay, we are bound to life, like we're glued to our lives and to the earth by karma, and we acquire karma like it was lint that blows in and gets stuck to our clothes, like it's sticky, like little seeds that fly through the air and stick to us. Karma just sticks to us, and it pulls us down. It makes us heavy. And so he said, do little to avoid building up more karma. So there's where Beavis and Butthead come in. They'd have made great Jains because they just sit around avoiding building up karma. Good for them. He said that the world is comprised of matter and soul. Kind of like matter and energy is what we would kind of say today, which is probably true. But he says that the goal of the religion is to get the soul out of the matter, right? So the body is matter. So the body's like a prison that traps a soul, and you want to get the soul out. Now, remember, you can't just commit suicide. That's bad. That gets you bad karma. You want to do the proper things that get you out of the body in a good way so that you go off to heaven. Yeah, flesh is matter. It traps the soul. It's evil. So you torment the flesh to deny the pleasure of the flesh and your connection to the earth and let you go off and fly up to heaven. And there's a Jain. He's got a mask on so he doesn't breathe in any insects, not because it's yucky to breathe in an insect and not because they're having a COVID outbreak there, but because he doesn't want to kill the bug. They also have a little broom that they carry to sweep the path ahead of them so they don't step on any bugs because they don't want to kill the bugs. Bad, bad karma. You can't receive outside help. So there may be gods. In other words, the Hindu gods may exist in Jainism, but they're of no help. They don't matter. I always describe it as the Hindu gods to Jains are like the Rocky Mountains to us in Illinois. Are they out there? I guess. We're told they are. Does it matter to you? Not really. If my car breaks down, are the Rocky Mountains going to do anything to help? No. If I need to pray to something to do better on my exam, if I pray to the Rocky Mountains, are they going to make me do better on my exam? No, I don't think so. And yet they're maybe out there. So the gods to Jains are like a mountain. They're big and powerful and they're out there, but they really don't matter, right? They just doesn't help a lot. There's no creator God. Matter is eternal, so matter has always been around. Prayer and worship are worthless. Now, and by the way, and then the scriptures are called the agamas or precepts. I want to mention one thing here about prayer and worship are worthless. The further, I feel like something's biting me. I'm sorry if I keep grabbing and scratching and all. I feel like I've gotten into wasps or something down here. The further east that we go, right, and we're in India now, but we're going to go to China, Japan, and further out. The further east you go, the more religions start to seem like a self-help plan more than like a religion the way that most of us in this part of the world understand religion, right? Most, not all, most of us in this part of the world think of religion as you pray to a divine being, probably just one of them, right? And if they take favor on your prayer and you're faithful and all that, they'll try to give you a blessing to help you, right? Well, that's not really the way it works the further east you go. The further east you go, it really is like a self-help like a 12-step program where you believe that there's a higher power, but it's really up to you to follow the steps to get to help yourself, really. So you'll see more of that as we go along. The majority of Jains are young, right? They can't afford to leave their homes and families for the ascetic life. So what they do is they just try to practice as best they can. They're probably vegetarians, for example, so they won't be killing any animals or be responsible for killing animals. Like if you still went and bought a steak, you would consider yourself responsible for the animal's death, even though you didn't kill it, right? Whereas if you just eat a salad, you're not responsible in any way for the animal's death. Okay, that's the idea. So the majority of them are just young people, young adults and children who can't afford to go off and leave their homes and families. But the minority are usually the older ones become monks. They become ascetics, we talked about. And this is considered the ideal life for a Jain, is being a monk. They are closest to release from the cycle, that moksha. All right, you take 5 vows. You vow not to harm other creatures. We already talked about that. You vow to be truthful. But truth is relative to a Jain. And again, you can read about this in the book if you want, but they see truth as a relative thing. It takes longer to explain than we have left in the class today. So I'm just going to let you look into that if you want. But again, it's kind of a subjective truth. Let's just go with that. They're supposed to only take what is given them, so they don't steal. When they become monks, they renounce sex and sexual pleasures, and they renounce all attachments of monks. But obviously the last 2 are only for monks, because when you're young and having a family and everything, those are harder to get rid of. All right, there's 2 sects of Jains: the white-clad, which wear clothing. They are the more liberal, more popular, because they wear a white garment, and they actually let women join, and women can go to heaven too. Then there's what's called the sky-clad. They wear the sky, because what's the sky made out of? Nothing, air. So the sky-clad are the more conservative. And remember, liberal and conservative is always relative to the situation you're talking about. Liberal means you're willing to be more progressive and open and new ideas and change. Conservative means you kind of keep things the way they've always been. So the more conservative sect of the sky-clad kind of want to keep things the way they've always been. They go around nearly nude. The holiest are just butt naked. And women are not even allowed in the temples. Women cannot get released from the cycle. They have to be reincarnated as a man. I guess that means every spirit out in the universe that's gone off to Hindu heaven or Jain heaven is male. Okay. Interesting. And then lastly, Jainism today, it's had some influence back on Hinduism. Like it left, and then Hindus went and said, oh, I like what they're doing. Let's try that. Particularly the big 2 A's, asceticism and ahimsa. Quite a few Hindus are into those 2 things, even though you don't have to be as a Hindu. They're optional, but they've basically taken them back from Jainism. There are only about 3.7 million Jains worldwide, just because it's hard to be a Jain. They can't have a profession that takes any life, so there's a few things that they can't do because those all involve killing. They often are wealthy in India because they go into business and they're trusted as being honest. And there are 40,000 temples in India, but that sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot when you realize that there's like 1.2 billion people in India. All right, so that's Jainism. A very quick look at them. Now here's the longer one. So we've got 35 minutes at most to get through this one. And that's Buddhism. And like I said, Buddhism is going to seem at first very similar to Jainism, but they're going to they diverge. They take different paths. Now, I always point out, now this is a fairly skinny Buddha, but when you see a Buddha that's kind of rotund and pudgy and has the big ears, understand that that's symbolic. That's probably a Chinese Buddha. And the idea is that it's representing, like, Buddha being round and pudgy is supposed to signify fortune, wealth, right? Like you got a lot. And the big ears are lucky. China considers big ears to be lucky. So Buddha, of course, being Buddha, he's going to have a big belly and big ears because that means he brings much fortune to your life and he's lucky. So we're still talking about religions that come out of India, but of course, Buddhism has its biggest impact in Southeast Asia and in China and Tibet here, and in eventually Korea and Japan. So all this area here today is Buddhist. So it began in the same century as Jainism, the 6th century BC, came out of Hinduism. And again, I've already gone over all this. They reject the Vedas and the caste system, so you're not a Hindu. Its nickname, the nickname of Buddhism is the middle way, because they say on the one hand, it could be party like a rock star worldliness, woo, baby, yeah, you know, doing drugs and hookers and everything. That's worldliness. On the other hand is that Jain asceticism where you're just living in a living in a box with a rock for your pillow, you know, and all that. By the way, they're the ones with asceticism that walk on the hot coals and sleep on a bed of nails. So Buddhism says we don't want to just party like rock stars, and we don't want to live this incredibly painful ascetic life. So Buddha found the middle way between the two. So it's, as I showed you on the map, it spread to East and Southeast Asia. That's like Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, but also China, Korea, Japan. But in India, where it came from, it got swallowed up again very quickly. The Hindus just said Buddha. Oh, that was just Vishnu. And they kept going. So you don't find a lot of Buddhism. In fact, if you watch Gandhi, the movie Gandhi, you will see almost every religion I can think of, people, except I don't think I've ever seen a Buddhist in it. You see Christians and Jews and Muslims and Hindus and all that, but you don't ever see a Buddhist. So the founder is Buddha, but his real name, his original name, was Siddhartha. His last name was Gautama, or his tribal name was Gautama. So his full name would be Siddhartha Gautama the Buddha, which is like Jesus' name was Jesus, son of Joseph. His title was Christ, which is Greek for the Messiah, Christos, or the Messiah, right? So Jesus, son of Joseph, the Christ, the Messiah. It's Siddhartha of the Gautama tribe, the Buddha. Okay. He was from the Gautama clan, and he lived from about 560 to 480 BC. He was the son of a Raja, wealthy, just like Mahavira. Grew up surrounded by youth, beauty, and health. And in fact, what happened was when he was a baby, all right, let's do the quick Buddha origin story. This is my favorite thing the entire semester in class. I don't know how well it's going to translate on video, but I'll do my best, okay? So Buddha was a baby when he was Siddhartha. He was a baby. He was in this palace with his wealthy parents, right? And they bring in a kind of a soothsayer prophet type to look at young Siddhartha and tell his future, his fortune. And the soothsayer prophet looks at him and says, wow, this child has a great future ahead of him, but it could be one of two things, just depending. The parents are like, oh, well, tell us more. He says, well, this child may either grow up to be a great ruler like his father, a Raja, right, who rules wisely over all the lands. And the parents are like, yes, yes, yes. Or he could be a great religious leader who sacrifices everything to help others. And the parents are like, oh, I don't like the sound of that. I don't want my child to sacrifice everything just to help the poor. But kind of that's no good, right? Because these are rich, powerful people. So they say, well, what would make him decide one way or the other? And the soothsayer says, well, if he ever sees poverty and old age and sickness, he has a great soul. This is what the soothsayer saw. He has a great soul, has a great spirit about him. And he just couldn't bear it. He just couldn't bear it knowing there are people that are sick and old and bad off. He would have to give up everything and wander the earth like Kung Fu, looking for an answer to solve everybody's problems. But if he never sees that, he'll be content to stay here and be a political ruler. The parents are like, okay, we can't ever let him see. We have to surround him with youth, beauty, and health. We can't ever let him see old age and sickness. So for a few years, Siddhartha is there, just being, avoiding seeing those. They avoid letting him see those things. But then one day, like a leper or something wanders through the place and falls down dead. And Siddhartha's horrified. There are people out there that are in such terrible shape. Oh my gosh. And he just can't bear it. And so Siddhartha gives up everything when he sees the ugliness of the real world, It made it impossible to stay in the palace, and so he left his family and home and goes on a search for answers to life's miseries. Okay? So his mother makes him a robe in one night. That'll come up again later. And he goes out to be a monk and to wander the earth trying to find answers. He goes out seeking enlightenment. And he tries studying philosophy, but clearly he didn't have Professor Witzig because he didn't like it and he didn't do well with it. So he gives that up. Then he takes the same path Mahavira did, right? See, so far, this could be Mahavira. This is more detailed than what I talked about Mahavira, but this is almost the exact same life. Like Mahavira, he tries severe asceticism. But when Mahavira got to this point and it wasn't working, Mahavira doubled down on even more severe asceticism. When Siddhartha gets to this point, he says, asceticism isn't working. I've got to go in the other direction. So here's what happened. This is my version of Buddha's origin story. As I always say, you can read or watch videos or whatever and get a different version, but this contains the essential facts the way I like to tell it, okay? So this is the story of Buddha's origin. So he's trying that severe asceticism and it's not working, but he's sitting in the park. There's like a public park. He's sitting there lotus style, with his legs folded and everything, meditating, he's trying to achieve moksha so that he can then, like Mahavira, teach other people how to get there in this one lifetime. Because if you can achieve moksha today, you don't have to live as a poor, sickly person anymore, right? You can just go right off to heaven. So he's trying to do that. He calls it enlightenment on how to get to heaven in a hurry. The Heaven Express, the Heaven Interstate. Well, asceticism doesn't work, but he's sitting there in the park with his buddies who are doing the same thing, and they're all emaciated. They haven't eaten in days. They're just skin and bones. They're scrawny and they're starving, but they're trying really, really hard to break the cycle. And again, this is my version. I tell it my way. You can read other versions, but this is my version, and I like it. Okay. Prove to me my version is not accurate. So he's sitting there in the park, and the 6th century BC equivalent of a hot dog vendor comes through the park selling, and I always say, he's saying, get your hot dogs here. Get your 6th century BC equivalent of a hot dog here, because he knew it was the 6th century BC. And before he can even stop himself, Mahavira jumps up. Now remember, all he's wanted is to break the cycle of reincarnation and become one with everything. He wants to be one with everything, one with the universe, one with all through this enlightenment. He hears the hot dog, his stomach is grumbling, and he jumps up and he runs toward the hot dog vendor. And he says to the guy's like, can I help you? And he says, make me one with everything. Like one with everything. One with everything. It's my favorite Buddha joke. It's my favorite joke in the whole semester. Like I said, it's hard to do it without an audience of immediate reaction. Although, honestly, in my classes on campus, when I tell that, usually 3 or 4 people are like, oh, ha, ha. And the rest are like, oh, I love it. I'm sorry. It's just my favorite joke. So, but it's not over yet. So he gets the hot dog, and all of his friends there in the park, they realize, oh no, he's about to mess up. He's going to eat something when he's supposed to be meditating and starving himself. And so all his friends are like, no, Siddhartha, no. They're diving for him. Put down the hot dog. And he gets it and he bites into it. Oh, and he achieves enlightenment. He has a revelation. And I'll tell you what his revelation was. I'll tell you how the hot dog did it. His revelation is that desiring something causes karma. Remember, karma piles up and drags you down. Tana is just his name for it. It means desire. Like if I'm sitting around going, man, I want a Ferrari. I sure do want a Ferrari. That's giving me bad karma and tying me down to the world. I should be going, how can I help others? How can I go off to heaven? Instead, I'm like, man, how can I get a Ferrari? So desire causes karma, and karma binds you to the earth, right? And what he figured out, I mean, this was his grand revelation, which honestly makes a lot of sense, is that Siddhartha figured out that desiring enlightenment is just as bad as any other kind of desire. In other words, desiring a Ferrari will keep you from going to heaven, but desiring to go to heaven will keep you from going to heaven too. You see, you have to quit desiring it. You have to let it come to you. You got to quit chasing it and let it come to you, right? So what he figured out was when he stopped desiring it, when he stopped chasing it, he found it. Now, I like to call, and you'll see examples of this more in a minute, I like to call this religion, I know it's called the middle way, but my nickname for it is the where are my car keys religion, or the baby bear religion. Let me explain. It is the where are my car keys religion because you know how like when you're in a hurry and you don't know where you've put your car keys, and the more you try to remember and the harder you try to look, you just have no luck at all. But if you go and just sit down and turn on the TV and have a drink and watch a show, after about 5 minutes, you're not worrying about it. You're like, oh, I remember. And they're in the refrigerator where you accidentally left them, you know. So when you quit looking for something is often when it will come back to you where it is. And that's kind of, I think it's neat. I think that of all the religions that we look at in this entire course, Buddhism actually is based on something that human beings actually kind of experience and do, right? We have these moments where, you know, we can't remember something, but if you stop and meditate or just not think about it or think about something else, it comes back to you. I think of it as the religion of the little light bulb coming on over your head, a little lightning bolt hitting you. It's also the baby bear religion in the sense that, you know, Jainism is the bear tries the Goldilocks' bed and it's too hard. The parent, you know, that bed is too hard. This bed is too soft, the worldliness. Buddhism is the middle way. It's the bear that was just right. Okay. So Siddhartha, now the Buddha, begins to teach, and he teaches to avoid extremes, right? Choose the middle way. Indulgences like just everything you want, having everything you can get. He says anyone can find enlightenment, any caste, either sex. That goes against Hinduism, so it's definitely not Hinduism anymore. And he says the soul is just it's just a collection of traits. There's no soul. I don't know what goes to heaven then, but whatever. And he formed a Buddhist monastic order to begin teaching these things. He laid out, I'm going to zip through this. You can go back over it and read about it. He founded he said there are 5 rules, and they're just 5 things you abstain from. You don't kill. You don't steal. Sounds very much like Judaism and Christianity and Islam, right? You don't kill. You don't steal. You don't lie. These are the big 3 that every religion would outlaw. And, you know, not a lot of religions go around saying what you really need to do is kill a lot of people and lie. You know, arguably. Improper sexual conduct, right? You can kind of see where that's coming from. And then they don't even want you to take any drugs or drink any liquor or anything. He says there's 4 noble truths. Now, these are I kind of broke this down to make the points as short as possible, particularly when I do it in class and people are writing it in their notebooks and stuff. But here's what it's saying, that there are 4 noble truths. There's the truth of pain. Number 1 is the truth of pain. The second noble truth is the truth of the cause of pain. And Buddha said the truth of the cause of pain is a craving, that tanha, that desire. Craving could be for pleasure, lust, passion, existence, or if you just crave going off to heaven. And I got to point that out. When Buddhists talk about non-existence, what that really means is not existing in the world anymore. You're not reincarnated anymore. You've gone off to Hindu heaven or Buddhist heaven, which is basically the same thing, right? Just like Jewish heaven and Christian heaven is basically the same thing, right? So what he's saying is when you crave going off to heaven and not existing on earth anymore and not being reincarnated, that's just as bad as any other craving. The third noble truth is the truth of the cessation of pain. Pain cessation means you get rid of pain. I used to work at a hospital, and they had a pain cessation section where they tried to find ways that didn't involve heavy narcotics to make you not suffer in pain. You know, they have other hypnotism and drugs that are less powerful and all that. So here Buddha is saying there is the truth of how you get rid of pain. And he said that the truth of the cessation of pain is non-attachment. So the way to get rid of pain is to not be attached to the physical world. And well, how do I get there? How do I do that? Well, there is a way that will help you, get rid of attachment and get rid of the pain. Now, I always, in the classroom, when people haven't looked at this yet, I always get a good laugh out of saying, you think Four Noble Truths was a lot to write down. Well, Buddha loved to make lists. So the answer to number 4 is another list, the Eightfold Path. I said, Buddha loved lists, man. He was always making grocery lists, and it's all vegetables, of course, and all that kind of stuff. But this is very short. The Eightfold Path is actually shorter than the Noble Truths. You just should have right views, right intention. I'm just going to zip through the right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. These are just 8 things you should do correctly. You should do properly. If you do those things properly, then it makes it easier to get rid of your pain and be non-attached and eventually go to heaven, right? I mean, that makes sense. Christianity could do the same thing, right? Christianity could say, if you do all of these things right, then you're more likely to go to heaven, right? It makes sense. Okay. The Eightfold Path, you follow it to break the bonds that tie you to life, release from that reincarnation cycle, get rid of that desire and craving. And so the Buddhist word you have probably heard before is nirvana. Nirvana is not the moksha of going to heaven. It is when you extinguish that desire and you no longer crave the physical world. So when a Buddhist achieves nirvana, they basically have achieved moksha, because now they're not bound to the earth anymore and they can go off and be one with everything, like a hot dog. So this religion diverges from Hinduism because they deny the relevance of the gods. When you deny the relevance, it doesn't mean you don't believe the gods exist. It just means you don't think they're going to do anything for you, so who cares? And the Chinese have always had this attitude about gods. It's very amusing. You read, like in the James Clavell book, said in China, a Chinese person will be mad at you and they'll say, all gods poop on your head. And you might say, well, which god are you wanting to poop on my head? And they're like, I don't know, whichever gods there are, they have to poop. So they're not really specific about it. They're very broad and general about it. So the gods aren't really relevant. It totally depends on you. Again, it's a self-help program at this point. The further east we go, it's less and less. Please help me, blessing, and more help yourself. The Emperor Asoka of India helped to spread Buddhism around, which is one of the reasons it became so big. And there's the directions that it went. Like I said, one version goes to Sri Lanka. One version goes down into Southeast Asia, where Islam eventually kind of takes over this area. And one version goes to Tibet, China, and Korea and Japan. In 390, 2 versions emerge. Now, there's not many religions we're going to look at, and we're going to look at all the big ones and a lot of the little ones. There's not many religions you can look at that haven't immediately divided into 2 or more warring camps, right? In Christianity, you have Catholic, Protestant, and Orthodox. In Islam, you have Sunni and Shiite. And in Buddhism, in 390, it divided into 2 camps. One is called Theravada. I'm going to do a little bit about Theravada, then I'll do Mahayana, the other one, and then we'll continue on. So Theravada is one of the versions. It's smaller and more, and again, that means more traditional, more old-fashioned. They're in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, so down here. This is like the southern Buddhism. And they say, do not rely on the gods or anything beyond yourself. It's a self-help type of approach. They, too, believe the monk is the ideal figure. You want to grow up and be a monk if you could. A Buddha is anyone who achieves nirvana by their own effort. So the Buddha was just like the first Buddha. Theravada says anybody can become a Buddha if they accomplish pretty much what Siddhartha did. The Jataka tales are kind of like, what would Buddha do? It's a series of stories of his life cultivating moral virtues. I don't know how they knew that that was his former lives, but okay. What? A what is a building, like Angkor Wat. It is a hall for teaching, preaching, and meditation. There's the monks in their orange robes. And there's usually a statue of Buddha, but it's not like you pray to the Buddha, to the statue. It's just representing the idea of Buddha. And there's, altar, candles, incense, living quarters for the monks, and pagodas, which are the pointy, tall buildings that serve as prayer centers and all that. The festival centers. Throat's getting a little sore, so I'm going to keep drinking. So there's the famous Angkor Wat in Cambodia. It's so famous it's even on their flag. It was just rediscovered in the jungle after being lost for a long time. I have a few pictures of it you can look at. The trees growing up inside of it look like alien. Look at that one. Man, holy cow. And there's the complex. So Theravada is big on meditation. See, there's the little light bulb comes on over your head. There's two kinds of Theravada meditation. Samatha, where you just concentrate really hard, which kind of sounds like Jainism, honestly. And there's Vipassana, where it is insight. You just hope that that lightning bolt hits you, that light bulb comes on, and you remember where the keys are. You understand how to go to heaven, you see. So one is kind of trying, which does sound like Jainism. I agree. And the other is just sort of like you're just sitting there going, oh, that's where I put my car keys. By the way, as I always like to say, if you're in a Wat and you do Samatha, you're doing what Samatha, huh? What Samatha me? What Samatha you? I don't know. Okay. These all work much better in a live audience than I need a laugh track. I need a laugh track for you guys. Let's go. Let's go. Theravada monks in their orange robes with two statues of Buddha. I don't know why they got two, but there you go. Oh, this was interesting. I just rewatched Shogun. This is from the great miniseries Shogun. And I just wanted to show that when Catholics and Jesuits began going to China and Japan in the 15 and 1600s, they quit wearing black over there and wore orange. That you can imagine if this was black, it would look exactly like a priest in the medieval period. But he needed the Japanese to understand that this is a religion. He's a monk, basically, right? He's a religious figure. So they just colored them orange because the Japanese and the Chinese were used to the idea of people in orange being monks, Buddhist priests instead of Catholic priests. Okay, the other branch, very quickly, is Mahayana. They think that he had some secrets he only shared with a few. He was more than a man. He was a divine being, almost divine being. So in other words, they kind of make Buddha into almost like a Jesus or a God. You know what I mean? Whereas Theravada said he was just the guy that figured out how to do this, and anybody can be a Buddha like him if you can figure out what he did. Mahayana says Siddhartha was basically a God or almost a God. Bodhisattvas are future Buddhas that are postponing nirvana until all beings can attain it. And there's statues of them in Kansas City and New York. It spread all around China, Tibet, Korea, Japan. It got into China by the 3rd century AD, and then from there off into the Pacific Islands. Different versions developed. And meanwhile, just like every type of Buddhism, it nearly died out in India. Yeah, Hinduism just came along and said, Buddha? Oh, that was Vishnu. And they kept going, right? They just absorbed it in, just like they do everything. Okay, the last little bit here, I'm going to run through this, is that Mahayana is kind of like Protestant Christianity. Theravada is kind of like Catholic, right? There's just one Catholic everything, and there's one Theravada. But in Protestant Christianity, you got lots of different denominations, and the same thing with Mahayana. So these are like the equivalent of, like if this was Christianity, I would now be talking about Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, Church of God, Church of Christ, Lutheran, Nazarene, all that, okay? Mahayana has all these different denominations or sects like Protestant Christianity. One's called the Pure Land sect, which is a lot like Christianity. You want to be reborn in a pure land like heaven, and they have Sunday school and church. Okay, interesting. There's the intuitive. This is where you try to have something just pop up in your mind, like where my car keys are. The truth of religion only comes in a sudden and intuitive flash. So she's just sitting there waiting to suddenly have her car keys remember where they are. Through meditation and sudden insight. Sudden insight. Zen is a type of it was originally a Chinese type of Buddhism that went over to Japan and caught on there. And Zen says reason is to be just don't try to figure out religion, right? Don't try to make it logically make sense. In fact, they say people must be deliberately confused. They come up with the little riddles. What is the sound of one hand clapping? And you're like, oh, and you get the revelation because you're distracted by this puzzle. Or they have like the little sand things that you rake, the Zen gardens. It's all designed to take your mind off of things and make you open to realizing the truth. Monks use a lot of caffeine to stay awake, to meditate a long time. That looks like the view I had in my apartment when I lived in Singapore. Is a Zen garden right outside their big shoji there. And theirs looks like the one, honestly, in St. Louis at the Botanical Gardens. Okay, some more sects. The rationalist sect, they actually do the opposite. They actually try to figure things out, and they study scrolls and scriptures. They're called sutras, the scrolls, the scriptures. The Nichiren, or socio-political sect, they only believe in the Lotus Sutra. All other teachings are false. Imagine that, a religion thinking all other religions are false. And they promote strong Japanese nationalism. You don't find them as much anymore today because they kind of went out of fashion when World War II ended, as you can probably guess, right? But they were very much promoting the nationalism. This was the branch of Buddhism that didn't have a problem with Japan invading China and Korea and bombing Pearl Harbor and all that. There is Tibetan Buddhism is the other really, I think probably Zen and Tibetan are the two denominations that are the most famous, right? Tibetan is because Tibet is very isolated up in the mountains behind Mount Everest and all that, the Himalayas. And they use magical words and spells in what they call tantras or manuals, like scrolls. There's the current Dalai Lama, by the way. Tantric Buddhism comes from Tibetan Buddhism. This is using those tantras or manuals. It often, though, has the connotation of sex, to be honest, that it's sex magic. They try to do various things to create energy and all through physical, or to make you, so you seek mystical union with the divine through sexual practices, or to conquer your passions. In other words, like when you catch the little kid smoking a cigarette, the parents will make him smoke 40 cigarettes and he gets so sick he never wants to touch a cigarette again. So in order to conquer your sexual passions, you just have a whole lot of sex, and theoretically you'll never want to have sex again. And I'm like, okay, I get that in theory, but I'm thinking there are plenty of people that if they just had a whole lot of sex, their reaction would be, I want to have a whole lot more of sex. But, I don't know. So, but that's two ways that Tantric Buddhism can work, either as sex magic or as to make you not want to ever do it again. They have the laziest religious practice ever, prayer wheels, where you don't have to memorize a prayer or read it or anything. The prayer is inscribed on these cylinders, and you just walk by them, and you roll them, and they boop, 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 send the prayer off to the gods. Unbelievable. And of course, lamas are their religious leaders. It means superior one. They have several lamas, but the Dalai Lama is like the top lama, king of the lamas. They are the de facto rulers of Tibet because the country is actually controlled by China, communist China, even though historically it wasn't necessarily part of China. Free Tibet. And the Dalai Lama, who's gone all around, he's not able to live in Tibet because the Chinese would arrest him and throw him in prison. So he's kind of a citizen of the world. He travels around, meets with the Pope, goes on television, does all this. He was chosen as a child because the reincarnation thing means when the Dalai Lama dies, a little boy that was born recently is the reincarnated Dalai Lama, and they find the one that's the most like him and raise him to be the next Dalai Lama. And there he is. And then, oh, there's that again. I think I thought I didn't put that in there, but anyway. Holy days, the New Year is in April. This is the old calendar. You know, when we used to celebrate New Year's April 1st, people that still did that are called April Fools. That's where that came from. Buddha's birthday is allegedly April 8th. I don't know how they know that. And there's the Festival of Souls. It's not like a soul festival with earth, wind, and fire. It is a festival, so it's kind of like the Day of the Dead. And there's the robe offering. Remember I said that Buddha's mom made his robe in one night? So people in a community where there's a Buddhist monastery will sometimes, on the robe offering day, they will sew a new robe for the monks to thank them for doing stuff in their community, because the monks will often serve, like clean up the community and serve as like health care for poor communities and all that kind of stuff. So to pay them back, they'll make them a bunch of new robes. And then Buddhism today is still growing since we in the West began to learn about it. The rise of Asian nationalism means that Asians are more proud of it and doing it. They're socially engaged Buddhism, which really means just like trying to do good works. And it is resurged in China because the Chinese government is not as totalitarian as they used to be back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. So there's a little more religion in China now. And it's growing in America because a lot of young people in America particularly find it to be, a lot of Americans want a spirituality, but they don't like organized religion. And so Buddhism kind of gives you that middle way where it gives you a set of beliefs and practices, but it's not an organized religion in the sense that you have to go to a church and obey, and follow all the rules and all that. Okay. You can look at those if you want. I'm not going to ask you a question about the countries. All right. So that's that. So there we are. Okay. So last thing here, test number 1 will be up in about a minute. You can do it today. You can do it anytime this week. I think it'll still be up through Sunday, maybe even Monday morning or something. I'm not sure, but sooner would probably be better. But take your time, study, prepare. If you have any questions, you can email me. We can even Zoom and have a one-on-one conversation, however you want to do it. And it'll just be on that first part, as I said. All right. I hope you guys have a good week. I hope you do well on that test. And contact me if you need to. Otherwise, I'll see you back again Monday, where we will get into the last of the Indian religion, Sikhism, and then we'll go on from there. All right. See you guys. It's noon, so good luck.